in a situation you're unequal. It says to then just withdraw, just to prevent something that you're not up for. It says in such a case, a wise, conciliatory attitude, that's the holy person again, it benefits the whole community when there's wisdom being expressed and there's conciliation. There's no one being drawn into conflict. So to the holy man or the sage, withdraws in time and goes home. This benefits town people, we'll say town people. All right, and then we'll move on to the next line. The next one is 4. It's just little snippets. Sometimes it's not always about you. Sometimes it's just you describing little snippets of details going on around you. So from the chapter conflict, chapter 6, we go to the chapter 4th line, 4th specific fortune cookie. Then it says, one cannot engage in conflict, one turns back and submits to fate. Changing your attitude and finding peace and having to hang in there will make good things result from that. So, inner attitude at first lacks peace. I'm being sent home. I'd like to improve it through conflict, but you can't. It says you might even be dealing with a weaker opponent, but it's better not to carry on the fight. Right is not on your side in such an occasion. You cannot justify this type of conflict to your own conscience. You turn back and accept the type of fate that's given to you. You change your mind and you find lasting peace in being accepting the cards as they were sort of thrown down. When that happens, then it seems like there's a good fortune that takes place. There's an acceptance of having to turn back and accepting whatever happens by not carrying on the fight. So line 4, sage turns back and does not carry out, not continue the type of fight, right? There's a fight, or at least a conflict. Let's say conflict. Accepting this fate, and in my mind, I think we're talking about maybe possibly a type of defeat. Accepting it. And then find peace. Find peace, and you start all of the supernatural principles working with you because you're at peace with different things. You're going with the grain of wood, then find peace. And it says, in being at one with eternal law. That's kind of lofty language. Lasting peace. Being at one with eternal law. That's a great quotation, huh? Lasting peace. At one with eternal law. I hope so. I mean, those are some good goals anyway. All right. And then we have another line, which is the top line. Remember, each line is not always exactly about you. It might be about you. So maybe it's describing just in this scenario events going on around you. So the top lines, line 6, is the chapter Conflict, page 31 of the Wilhelm book. Even if by chance you get a leather belt of a prize, in the end it would have been snatched away 3 times anyway. So it's like someone who did carry out conflict to the bitter end and has a certain type of triumph, and that person's given a lot of praise and decorations, but the fact of the matter is that it's not really a lasting type of happiness that person who carries out that conflict to the bitter end just opens attacks on themselves, and the result is conflict without end. And so here we have a sort of a description of someone who's not willing to forgive, who's not willing to let go, they're not willing to understand. And when they don't return home, they keep going and they keep pursuing it. It just opens them up to all kinds of different attacks and facets and vulnerabilities, and endless conflict without end. Sounds like it's not anything anyone would want to be entered into, even if you are awarded a leather belt as a prize. So, someone who's triumphed, a triumphant victor, right? But one at serious cost. And these conflicts keep going on. Keep going on. Alright, so then I read the letter A, which is the first chapter. We looked at the image for the general chapter earlier, the general chapter conflict. I had to focus on these first two symbols, the 6 lines, page 28 of the Wilhelm conflict chapter. You have heaven over water, and according to the image, small chapter and image, the things are moving away. Or creative over abysmal. I guess those things are so much opposite. Abysmal is what chaos. Creative is creating order in chaos. And talks about harmonizing group activities. So for conflict, we could say forces moving apart. For spiritual trends, group trends, right? It talks about finding harmony with spiritual trends of individuals harmonizing. Wow, there's some language. So if there's a way for the spiritual trends of people involved in these groups to feel a sense of harmony. Spiritual trends. Of individuals harmonizing, right? In harmony. Something like that. Or there might have to be a description of rights and duties, sort of exact definition of rights and duties. So I'll say rules laid down, maybe. I'm going to try this other pen and see if that one works better. Alright, so it's just a couple quick ideas for the general chapter, the lines that we got. And then going to the second number, which is 8. I got holding together. And again, every line that had a circle on it, which was the red marble, in this case 2, 4, and 6, those become their opposites. So instead of solid lines, they become broken lines, and I ended up with Khan over Kun, which gives me 8. The image here is water over heaven, water over earth, right? And go right to the image. Just talk about what does water over earth bring to your mind. Does anything come to mind? It says water is earth. On water is earth. It talks about kings of antiquity bestowing different states on fiefs and friendly relations with the feudal lords. So it's like the kings of antiquity building political relationships with all these different sects. People, I haven't stuck my pen in my coffee cup. That's the general chapter, the image for the first throw. It's 8 holding together. So how do you hold groups together, political trends of groups together? You give positions of power to different people who are close in your alliance. I mean, at least according to this, just focusing on the image. Earth is water, the image of holding together, like a bowl, I guess. Right? Now, I'll write down a quick phrase about that, see if this pen is any better. Not much. Stick with the first one. Some people use the second half of the throw as a resolution, whatever the tension was that was being discussed in the first half. In other words, with conflict, the first half of the throw, we got 3 fortune cookies having to do with conflict. So one might argue that there's a sort of a scenario that was described. There's 3 different lines. 2 of them, the hero at hand goes home, and accepts the implications of not continuing. In the third line, there is someone that continues carrying it on, and they have a short-term victory, but that type of thing keeps happening to them over and over and over. So you got 2 people going home and one guy triumphant, bitter victor kind of thing. That if that's a scenario, if that's where the conflict was, or if that's any parallel that was going on in your life, I mean, one might argue I did come home from truck driving. I don't know, but to come back, accept that sometimes there are other things in mind, accepting peace, and then maybe the person who keeps winning keeps taking it on. Who knows? Other truck drivers maybe who can keep driving, keep having events, having to drive in the snow, all these different things to keep that thing in moving motion. I don't know. But then you go, Sarah, if that's the tension, if that's the description, if that's what's the solution? Where do you see that going if nothing were to change in the way that things are going now? It's the second half, the second number that it's supposed to be an answer to where your things seem to be headed now. And so we're talking about conflict, people going home, one carrying on to the bitter end. And the second half, we talk about someone who has the traits of keeping a political entity together. Political titles given out to allies and a certain type of alliances that the feudal kings had to be maintained. So what would be for holding together some of those traits, holding together? That whole first chapter, for first few paragraphs of that holding together, not just focusing on the image, but the whole first few paragraphs of that chapter, rich and dialogue and discussion about different ways to hold groups together, how to hold. And it seems like, as is always the case with when you're doing specific readings for different throws, is that sometimes it can work on a deep level within your heart. Sometimes it can work on society that's going on around you. And then the third level is heaven. Sometimes it could be referring to the spiritual trends of the people in heaven. So you never know, is it you, is it society around you, the situation around you, or is it like a heaven, the heavenly communities thing that's going on. It's always one of those 3 somehow, or at least that's one useful way of looking at it. And so for this, now we're looking at holding together a king solidifying power by giving titles? But not just titles, power to key allies, really, right? As a way of holding together. So I don't know. You could say, all right, well, that's conflict. Coming home from, say, truck driving. Then the solution is that there's going to be someone who's very good at keeping groups together. Or you can say that that it is held well together, that it's through all of those different interacting principles, what you went through, that's evidence that it was holding well together. I don't know, different ways of interpreting it. There's nothing hard and fast here. So that's the type of note I would take for that first throw, and then you keep going, and that's like 1/3 of the way. You would ideally want to draw 3. So you go ahead and we'll draw a bit of green. It's like drawing from a well. Red. The line for the green is solid. Red is solid circle. And reds or blues gives you a specific line that they call changes. Well, we got a blue, Robbie. 3rd line. It's not that often I get a blue. And green. Green. Red. And the red is the line with a circle in it. I think the blue is the broken line with the X. One of the reasons some people think that the marble matches the yardstick the most is because with coins you can get broken line with the X, the line that changes, but that's the least often drawn. And with the Yarl stalks, apparently the theme is, or the idea is that it's the least often drawn there as well. Anyway, so we got Shein over Tui, which is from the bottom writing, from the bottom up. I got gathering it from the colors. I got my numbers: solid, solid, broken, solid, solid, solid. So that's Shein over Tui, which is 10. And then everywhere I got a red or a blue, the line changes to its opposite. So then I get broken, solid, solid over Li, which is Tui over Li, 49. And first number's 10, my second number's 49. And since I drew some blue and red marbles, I have 3 lines that change. And I'll start from the bottom, work my way up. Let's do the fortune cookies. Let's see what chapter 10 is about. I seem to remember grace. No. So chapter 10 is treading, something called treading, also is considered a conduct. Treading. Someone who treads on something. And we'll go right to the image, as we've been doing. If you look at the 2 lines, the sets of lines, you have Shein over Tui, and according to the image, it's heaven over lake. Is there anything that comes to mind when you think of heaven over lake? Like heaven would be the cloud that feeds the lake? I don't know. Let's see what they say about it. The image, heaven above, lake below. Talks about the superior man or the sage, or the student, has to discriminate between high and low, and therefore fortifying the thinking of the people. Something about the sage or the superior man determining what is right and wrong, what's considered high and low, I guess, and therefore fortifying the thinking of the people. And who could people be? The people could be your subconscious of the you. Could be the people of society, local powers, trends, or it could be the people I feel in heaven, the 3rd level. Which are the people that we're talking about now? Who's getting their thinking fortified? And let's talk about a king with the people. Could be your subconscious, the king with the people being your subconscious, the king being your conscious, and how you interact. You have to, or it could be the younger, older brother, or you want to keep a certain amount of love going on. The older brother taking leadership, but also being responsible. The younger brother being willing to accept leadership and being grateful for things given and not having to always drive the car. Anyway, line 2, or we were talking about the image for treading, talks about heaven and lake showing a difference of elevation. And since they're a very different nature, it says there's no envy between them. So also between mankind, there are sometimes different differences in elevation. It's impossible to bring out universal equality to all the people in the world. It says, but it's important that differences in social rank are not arbitrary and unjust. It says, because when that happens, then social rank, envy and class struggle are the consequences. People get angry with each other for others getting more than they are getting. But when somehow that social status is given based on inner worth, somehow people accept those differences of authority on different levels. And it says that external differences in rank correspond with inner worth. When that's going on, the inner worth then is able to form the criteria of external rank. And people acquiesce and everybody